let's bring it in. TrueHoop's Monday through Friday, 11 a.m. Eastern Zoom show. We have a very esteemed guest today. He's just not here yet. He'll be here in a second.
His esteem is growing by the minute.
It is. You tend to build a little mythos in the meantime, you know. Let me remind you, as I always do, that if you have a question for anyone on the show, just hit the chat thing, which I'm doing now, and then we will see your question and we'll work it in. Devin's the CEO of that area. So David, I am a little bit on a high today because I left the house this morning. I went and talked to strangers. My daughter and I went to give blood, and that counts as a really, really fun thing in May 2020.
Yeah, you got some free cookies?
They give you little cookies, pretzels. Yeah, no, it's really good. And you, okay, then while I was there, you texted me that basically you love Sneaker Week.
I love what?
Sneaker Week.
Oh, yeah, this has been my favorite 3 days. We've had some amazing guests, obviously, for, almost 2 months now. But just the theme of it, which was your idea, kind of builds on each other. And then I told you on the phone yesterday, having coached so many players like Chad and Wozni, it hits me right in my heart. Like, I've loved coaching New York City kids so much. I've loved coaching kids from all over the world. I've had players from Georgia. I mean the country, not the state. Like, I've loved kids from everywhere, but New York City kids just, they're so competitive. They want to be so good. And I always say this, players that really want to be great listen with their eyes. And that's been my experience with New York City players. More than any other place, they listen with their eyes. They're just hanging on every piece of wisdom I may or may not have to add. And then they just compete. And I don't think Waz was a player like Chad was, but just hearing their story, I can listen to them all day.
Yeah, I've learned a lot. I think the other fun thing is, like, you know, just being a total ignoramus and wandering into a topic is fun.
Like me. Yeah.
No, like me. I just this has been a week
of no idea. Yeah.
Yeah. We're learning with everybody. And today, so let's talk about Matt Powell. He's 40 years looking in the data of retail with the focus in sports, and just how does this actually work, right? Ben Aronson started the week with a lot of kind of insidery intel as to how it really works, and I think Matt will double down there. And what I'm particularly excited about is on Monday, Ben Aronson was like, look, LeVar Ball had a great idea. He was just the wrong guy with the wrong player, but like somebody could check a lot of boxes with this sort of insurgent new sneaker company. And that made me think, like, nobody's really succeeded against Nike in the history of this industry, which was born with Nike and Jordan brand, right? I'm like, so how does a Luke Skywalker succeed against this Death Star, right?
We've got an authentic sandwich. If Matt is able to join us, because we'll have Ben and Matt on the business side of things sandwiched around the authentic views of two young men. Well, they're still relatively young compared to me, especially, who lived it, right?
Yeah.
I thought Waz's comments about MJ were so vital, but he said the same thing Chad was saying, that, in a sense, game recognizes game. Ballers recognize ballers. When you are authentic, in this world, especially the last 20 years, you can see fakes so quickly. And I think that that's one of the reasons why sneakers are moving is that the people buying it are recognizing they want to connect with that authentic character. And I want to hear I really am anxious to hear what Matt says about that.
So you seem a little nervous that he might not show up.
Do you know something I don't know?
No, but you said that. Okay.
Yeah.
So let's initiate our backup plan, which is you think the Jazz should have won against the Bulls. Tell me about that. That was great. That was fascinating stuff.
I didn't study, last night they showed Game 6 as a movie, which is honestly, I felt like ESPN screwed up. They should have gone back to back with that Game 6, and then not last year's because the Warriors were so beat up, We go to the last competitive finals game. It would have been great to see just the difference in style of play. And I was coaching in the 80s. I wasn't in the NBA, but the lack of strategy, the poor execution. I mean, you said on the phone, I mean, it may just been guys like John Stockton were exhausted, but he made some really terrible passes. Karl Malone made a huge mistake not realizing Jordan was likely going to come try to get a double there. Malone had been doubled the possession before by Pippen from the top side, and he threw it across court. Stockton made a three, or maybe two possessions before. So on the famous possession where Jordan strips him, he just came baseline side. That's something you teach in high school when you've got a really good low post player. Get ready for the double to come from the top, from the opposite wing, or from the baseline. You don't know where it's going to come from, but you got to be looking for it. And then I said to you also, they ran a pick and pop, a very simple pick and pop, Malone Stockton, which they ran 1,000 times this season. I'm not even kidding. It's crazy how often they ran that play. And Harper and Pippen were defending it. These are two of the Bulls' three best defenders along with Jordan. And they had no idea what. Both guys kind of went with Stockton, but Stockton wasn't really a threat to shoot the three back then with time on the clock. And they left Malone wide open for what's an easy shot for him. I just was stunned at that mistake. Not to mention the fact that Jordan got two unassisted shots, in a sense, to win the game. He made a layup in 4 seconds off a sideline inbounds, and then he made the shot over Russell with no hint of doubling. I don't know what the Jazz were doing. Pippen could barely stand. So you could either leave off Pippen or you could leave off another guy and then rotate off from Pippen to the guy you just left from, which would have been a little more nuanced and probably better. But either way, make Pippen, he had made a couple shots in the fourth quarter, but make him make the tough shot with a bad back. But don't let Jordan do it. You got to have a call for that late in the game because Jordan had just made the steal, so not calling a timeout was really smart. If Jackson had called timeout, I do think they would have doubled Jordan, as we've seen in other possessions, in other series. So not calling a timeout was super smart. But you should know, go double.
Well, and these are Pippen's back, people being not mentally sharp, right? And a million other signs, including everything everybody says who played then. Like they were for sure 100% nowhere close to peak, right?
No.
These were exhausted, rundown players, which is why this was around the very end of when players would play giant regular season minutes and then win a championship, right?
That's right.
It's basically stopped. Nobody plays 3,000 minutes and wins a championship anymore. In fact, no one even plays 3,000 minutes anymore, other than like James Harden one season, I think. And so to me, like, you can see why, right? Season's sixth best team playing against the Bulls in that shape, if they just were fresher, might have won, right? And that's kind of what's happened, I think, is teams are just playing a little fresher.
Do we have on-off data from Jordan's years? Because I would have loved to know what Jordan's team was doing when Pippen was on the court and Jordan off the court. Because Jordan played 40-something minutes in all those games. Now, in the last game, I almost get it because of Pippen's back. But I'm not sure it would have been smart in other games to do that.
Judy, do you think we could bring Gerard on for 1 second while I talk Matt Powell through how to join our Zoom call? This is live television, ladies and gentlemen. Gerard, good morning.
Good morning. This is how we do. How are you, Henry? Hey, Coach, I had a quick question for you. So, the finals, eventually, it's just a war of attrition, right? Because these guys are so beat up. How much does physical fatigue impact your ability to mentally think, okay, this is the situation. This is where, these guys just, like you said, they're making mistakes that a junior high school player wouldn't make, but they're just like their brains can't work.
Gerard, it's everything. And I never appreciated it until 1994 when Florida played Duke in the Final Four, and Florida starting center was my 4-year player from high school, Dimitri Hill.
I remember.
And after the game, Dimitri had 17-9. He was the MVP for the Gators, but Grant Hill won the game for Duke. So when the game ended, we stayed around for a while because the first game had already been played. It was Arkansas, Arizona. I went to Dimitri's hotel room. Remember, this is a kid I knew since 8th grade. And I said, he missed a shot late in the game, like a layup. I said, Dimitri, I've coached you for 5 years. You never miss a layup, ever. Like that never happens. you were wide open. What happened? He's like, Coach, I have never been more exhausted in my life. I have no idea. I don't remember the play until you just said it. I hadn't thought about it. My brain was toast. And I remember, I vividly remember asking him, I know we were in the hotel room. And from then on, it made sense to me as a coach. Well, I got to make sure we don't get late games where my best player is exhausted. I need to keep them fresh because I can't have them do things they never normally do. So, yeah, fatigue it's almost like your brain shuts off because the oxygen isn't getting there in time.
Yeah. Makes
Speaking
sense
of that, I think the reason Matt's a little late, or especially late, is because I didn't send him the link.
Well, we can't blame it on giving blood.
I gave it all. I gave everything I had.
Is he coming on though, Henry?
Yeah, he'll be here in a second.
So yeah, Gerard, that's exactly I think what it is. And in that game, Hornacek threw a terrible hit-ahead pass with like 2.5 to play that was picked off by Jordan. The Jazz executed down the stretch horrendously. And this is the Jazz.
you can see it. I'm not a Malone guy, but like he knew what was coming that play, right? Jordan wasn't going to clear out, but you just saw him just put the ball down and then
you should be a Malone guy, by the way. You may not like Malone as a person, right. But you're talking about top 2 power forwards of all time. Yeah,
that's wise. I can't argue.
Yeah, he was incredible. Yeah, people are going crazy about him right now because they're acting like he discredited Jordan by saying it wasn't just Jordan, it was the Bulls. I happen to agree with Malone. The Bulls. Steve Kerr was very good shooter. Pippen was better than I even realized, and even then I knew he was amazing. Harper was normally a good defender. Phil Jackson's a great coach. Rodman was incredible what he did. Malone was right to respect the other team. He might be a jerk in real life. I don't know. I guess so. But I don't care that he doesn't really credit Jordan. He said Jordan's amazing. He didn't. I don't think Jordan already makes up enough windmills, right? That he should be fighting. You don't have to make it like Malone did it because Malone didn't do anything bad.
The one Malone thing that made me a little so he's kind of cranky, right? He was famously salty, difficult. Fine. A lot of people are, right? We all have grandparents like that or whatever. But the one thing that kind of blew my mind was a friend of mine went to at All-Star Weekend. There are these very exclusive parties with the sponsors, the people who write the checks for the NBA, right? This is the official sponsors,
like Kia and those people. Yeah.
And I think some of the players are required to go and hobnob with the executives from this thing, right? And apparently at that thing, Karl Malone was it was like he hosted the party. He was the most charming, knew everybody's name, rested a hand on your shoulder, looked you in the eye.
You can't mess with the money, Henry. You can't.
That's how you play the game.
But that's where
play the game.
I was okay with the idea that he didn't have those skills, but the fact that he just opted to never use them,
right.
That was surprising.
Right.
That's like finding out your friend can cook, but they just won't make you dinner, right? It's like you're a 4-star chef. What the heck?
Having the skill and not using it. Was he not liked at all in Utah by his teammates? I don't know.
No, I think he was liked by his teammates. I think around the league and then fans in general, I think he's gotten a bad rap over time. Like a lot of the Kobe stuff, what he said about Kobe's wife at the time, all these things. Wow. Malone just kind of, he gets people don't like him for those reasons.
Randy just messaged about Seinfeld, the massage episode. I get it.
I have no idea what you're talking
Jerry
about.
Seinfeld dated a professional masseuse, but she would never give him a massage. It's like dating a comedian. He's never funny. I'm funny enough. Let me just relax, which Jerry never did. So all he tried to do was get her hands on his shoulders, and then she got mad. She's like, "I do this for a living." It was a very funny episode.
That's when Dwayne Kennedy was on the show. I really just wanted to ask him to tell jokes the whole time, but that's not cool, right? That would not have been.
No, that's
be funny. Go.
Yeah.
Here goes Matt.
That's very exciting.
This is big.
It takes about half an hour to log into Zoom, though, so it could be a while before he's actually here.
What an entrance. There's a famous Seinfeld where he
Matt, my apologies. Can you hear me okay?
He's muted.
Yep, I sure can. How are you?
Great. Thank you so much. It's all my fault. We have a standard document I send to guests in advance. In my head, I just checked off that I'd send it to you, and then I realized now I didn't, and I'm very sorry about that.
No worries. We're good now.
I'm quoting you quoted Churchill saying, "Never let a good crisis go to waste." So we're putting that into action right now. So can you just give us some background about how you got into the sneaker business?
Sure. Well, I started out my career as a retailer. I worked for a big department store chain when I got out of college. I stayed there about 20 years, and then in the mid 90s, there was an implosion of retail, and I ended up in the sports industry. I worked for a big box sporting goods retailer. I worked for a sneaker superstore. I worked for Modell's, and actually the second coolest job I had after this one was I worked for a .com called NVP.com that was started by John Elway, Michael Jordan, and Wayne Gretzky.
Yeah.
And so I got to meet those guys and work with them. And then I decided I wanted to get out of the retail rat race and started a consulting business. And I had met a couple of hedge fund managers who said they would pay me to do research on the industry. And 20 years later, I'm still doing research on the industry.
Wow. And this is NPD.
No, actually, it was my own firm for the first 15 years.
Oh, okay. I see.
Almost 6 years now.
Okay. And so like who who employs you? Like who are your clients for doing this kind of research?
Well, today it's all the major brands and retailers in this.
Yeah.
And I last year before COVID, I was on the road 45 weeks out of the year.
Wow.
Presentations to brands and retailers about my role at NPD is really to be I am the sports industry analyst. So I'm not tracking just athletic footwear. I'm tracking activewear, team sports, golf, outdoor equipment.
Where do you get the data?
The retailers supply us the data, and we then aggregate it all and give it back to them in aggregate and give them access to people like me. They're willing to share their data because they want to be able to get an industry view of what's happening.
So we have this week going on. We're calling it Sneaker Week, where David and I have both worked at basketball for our whole adult lives, and we realized that basketball is a small little industry compared to this much bigger behemoth of what you know about. And so we're just trying to go on a little journey of learning about how it actually works. And we've had some different guests. Can you tell us, like, what is it that we don't know? Like, when you started learning from the data and your experience, like what are the surprises of this basketball sneaker world?
Well, I think the one thing that when I get into conversations about what's happening in the sneaker business is to really help people understand that it's a huge business and it's not really about drops. Drops have a place, but they are really not what drives the marketplace. What drives the marketplace is simply athleisure as a trend and people wanting to wear comfortable, fun shoes. And, the largest selling shoe last year in the United States, sold more dollars than any other shoe, was a shoe called the Tangent by Nike. And it's a shoe that's sold through retailers like Shoe Carnival and DSW and Kohl's. And it was the top selling shoe. When we look at drops, which get all the attention and all the buzz out there, they really are a tiny, tiny sliver of the overall market, probably less than 5% of primary retail sales.
We were using this analogy of it's little like haute couture, like people don't purchase what happens on the runway. Is that?
In some ways it is, although I think that the other thing that's happened in recent years is that there were always collectors of sneakers back in the day, and going back into the mid '80s, people started collecting sneakers, and most of those transactions were peer to peer. You'd find somebody on a listserv, or you later on Craigslist and eBay. But with the advent of the modern sneaker resale platforms, it's introduced a new class of individuals who I'm going to call flippers. And they're only in it to get it and flip it. And oftentimes they'll put a shoe up for sale before the shoe is released on the assumption we're going to get a pair and try to make the transaction. And what's happened there is it's increased the resale price of shoes. It's put a middleman between the primary purchaser and the collector who wants a pair. And it's raised prices for everybody and made shoes less available. And so that, I think that's maybe a downside to these platforms. I think obviously the platforms do provide a great service in their authentication, their ease of transaction, et cetera. But people are having to pay more for shoes. And then you just got people who are out there generally speculating on product. And everybody thinks they can make $100,000 a year reselling sneakers. And some people do, but not very many.
Wait. There's a large number of people are buying $100,000 worth of shoes a year to resell?
Yeah, there are people who figured out how to get access to limited edition shoes. People are using bots to be able to get through firewalls quickly. And again, I don't want to make it sound like there are millions of people making that money. Most of them are 12-year-old kids who got 6 or 8 pairs of shoes, and maybe they made $100. But
I feel so old.
The other shoes they bought for too much and have lost money on them.
What drives the shoe? I think you called it the tangent. What drove that sale? Was just comfortable and price point?
Yep, comfortable. It was a $75 retail shoe. It was kind of basic looking, but it definitely looked like an athletic shoe. Obviously, Nike being the market leader benefited. That helped benefit it as well. And it just was a shoe that caught people's imagination.
Does every sneaker company try for that? I mean, you would think that they would. I would think that they would. Where you're keep looking for that kind of like the meat potatoes kind of sneaker that can sell to anyone who's just trying to put nice shoes on their kid for the first day of school.
Yep,
that's the goal for
exactly. And I think this brings up another interesting point. I think that the most of the drops, many of the drops are really tiny, 50,000 pairs. Sometimes they're only 500 pairs. And last year, Nike made 400 million pairs of shoes globally, and Adidas made 400 million pairs of shoes globally. Wow. So a 50,000 pair drop is really not even it's a drop in the ocean, right? It really doesn't matter. And yet that's all people want to talk about, or, Nike X somebody and how that was an exciting drop. And again, the first Yeezy that Adidas came out with sold for 30 times its manufactured price. It's a suggested retail price. $9,000 for a pair of shoes when you paid $300 for it. So it's pretty exciting, I guess. But there weren't a lot of pairs out there. So we did not create a class of millionaires overnight on Yeezy.
I have a quote on the wall over there, which is from Daniel Kahneman. Thinking Fast and Slow Nobel Prize winner guy. But he says basically no one ever made a decision because of a number. They need a story, right? So I think maybe this the Yeezy makes the story, right?
Yeah. Well, we live in stories, no question. That statement is absolutely correct.
When you're speculating, because you're speculating too, do you have to familiarize yourself with the athlete who is doing a drop, who is getting a signature shoe, and like when Kobe first signed with Adidas? I told the story yesterday. My brother predicted big things for Adidas because he said the guy's an incredible player. I didn't really know him that well.
Yeah, I think the thing that really drives resale is limited distribution. If you think about the first worn shoe that just sold for $560,000, it was one of one, right? Yeah. Nobody else can have that shoe except that person. So it gets a high resale value. If Kith does a drop with 800 pairs of shoes, those shoes have a high resale value. If Nike makes a million pairs of we saw this really happen in 2018 where Adidas made 1 million pairs of Yeezy that they shipped into the market in about 6 weeks, and it really crashed the resale market for a while for Yeezy because there was so much supply. And Adidas realized that they the error of their way, shall we say, and then for all of 19 they did not increase the amount of pairs over 18, and consequently that shoe now has revived a little bit in terms of its resale value.
So this business literally does not scale.
Yes.
That's amazing.
I've written a blog about that. Thinking that drops are going to scale is the two things are in opposition to each other, right? Yeah. If it's got to be small to be successful, then it can never be big. So
it's the exclusive aspect of it that drives it. And that's
Right.
that's what led to
Exactly.
the overall sales. Yeah, the exclusivity is the key.
So this, I
Exactly.
mean, I don't want to make you. I don't know if this is awkward because you have clients in this business, but like, nobody's ever really been able to dislodge Nike and Jordan brand from the top of this business. Why? Why is it so impossible? Why has nobody succeeded meaningfully?
Well, it's really interesting that it really is a U.S. phenomenon only, and the United States represents 35% of the world's sneaker business, and we clearly are not 35% of the world's population. Outside of the U.S., there's relative parity between Nike and Adidas. They both have around 20-odd%, whether it's in China or in England or in Germany or wherever. And sometimes Nike's number one, and sometimes Adidas is number one. But they're very close together. It's only in the United States where there's this huge gap. And part of it is, I think that Nike is viewed as a US brand and Adidas is viewed as a foreign brand. I think the long-term effect of Michael Jordan playing for Nike did a lot for that phenomenon. If you think about the bulk of Nike's endorsed athletes, they're mostly US based. They're not entirely US based, but mostly US based. And then our culture of wearing sneakers all the time is different than the rest of the world. Now, the rest of the world's catching up to us there, but sneaker culture and wearing athletic shoes to every possible social occasion you can think about right now is a piece of that. So it's really only in the US where there's this huge gap.
Is it really catching up to say they're wearing more sneakers, or kind of falling down? Like, is it that great to wear sneakers all the time?
You mean the world or here?
I mean, you're saying we lead the world, but are we really leading the world?
I see.
Are we pulling them down?
You certainly could argue that point. I agree.
David really values quality footwear. We earlier talked about shoe trees. He's keeping his shoes in like a very particular way. I think he's worried about us. He wants us to our feet to look good. So would LeVar Ball sort of made a run at his own brand. And Ben Aronson, who was on the show on Monday, said basically he thought that it was the wrong guy with the wrong approach, with the wrong athlete, but that somebody in that role might be sort of a Luke Skywalker who takes on the Death Star or whatever. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I think the model is fundamentally broken, and on a whole bunch of levels. I agree. I think there was way too much ego involved in Big Baller. The price point was not justified at all based on what the shoe was. There were all kinds of operational errors, shoes shipping late and so forth, and they ultimately did not make very many pairs as I had predicted. But most of the endorsed athletes today simply are not earning out their contracts on merchandise sales any longer, and we've got to change the model. It was a conversation recently. Under Armour released their results, and they talked about how they're renegotiating some of their endorsement contracts to try to reduce their expenses. It's their biggest sunk cost that they have in marketing are these athlete contracts. And again, brands are just not getting the value out of them in terms of merchandise sales. I think if you want to step away and say, okay, this is a marketing cost, and LeBron wearing Nike, being the face of Nike, has a value, and I don't disagree with that. But simply the money that they're paying is broken. But on the flip of it is, it's really, really hard to build a shoe brand. And that's why you don't see a lot of new shoe brands popping up all over the place. There are a lot of people who go out and try to do stuff, but they make, for the most part, it's very derivative product. It looks like Air Force One, it looks like Chuck Taylor, and the market doesn't need another Air Force One or a Chuck Taylor. We got that already. So, but it's very, very expensive to develop and make footwear, particularly performance footwear. And I think that's a barrier to someone doing this. But his idea wasn't wrong. His execution was horrible.
Is that what you predicted when you wrote about it? Is that what you predicted, that it'd just be hard to execute a strategy and operate it right? Yes.
And again, the price point of the shoe, the difficulty of developing the shoe, how they were going to ship it to the consumer, it's really, really complicated.
Oh, there they are. And what happened with, like, it seemed like for a year, it seemed Under Armour had this tremendously exciting Steph Curry emergence, and then it just seemed to dissipate. What happened there?
Well, the biggest thing that happened, and this happened to everybody, was that essentially basketball shoes became less fashionable. And we moved into what was really what I would describe as the athleisure cycle of the industry, where we were wearing athletically inspired shoes with no intention of ever doing sport in them. And you know, we survey our consumer panel. We also track the consumer purchases, and we asked them, you bought a pair of sports shoes, what do you intend to do with them? And last year, only 14%, 14% of people who bought a sports shoe said they intended to do sport in those shoes.
Wow.
It's always been a fashion business. It's always been a casual footwear business, but it's more so than ever. And what we call sport lifestyle, which includes shoes like the Nike Tangent and retro shoes like Air Jordan product, is half of the sales today. Basketball, that represents less than 4% of all athletic shoes sold in dollars. And so what the first Curry was exciting and it was new and he was emerging obviously as an elite player. And then the reality of the fashion world set in and everybody's basketball business went backwards.
What sport dominates shoe sales?
I'm sorry?
If basketball is 4%, what sport dominates shoe sales? Is it cleats?
It's sport lifestyle. It's half of the business, and then the next biggest category is performance running.
Oh, performance running, of course.
People are still buying running shoes, although they're not. Well, today it looks like with COVID, we're going to see a shift in the marketplace back to performance again, which will be very interesting, because people are definitely running. People who can't or won't go to the gym are looking for other ways to keep their fitness regime up, and so bicycle sales are way up. Running shoe sales are not as bad as other categories, and so we could see a running emerge out of this after it's over.
You're going to laugh at this, but is there a design or an interest in trying to get the gamer business?
Whoa!
Try to get the
gamers, which because there's a lot of
there's several. Yes, that's a great question. There are several people who are investing in esports. Unfortunately, you don't need a pair of shoes to play sports, so that's a somewhat of a damper. There's some business being done. It's mostly because I've got the T-shirt that the guy wears, and I'm leveraging that a little bit. But certainly esports are getting a lot of attention right now, and maybe we do see a subline come out around esports. But so far, nobody's really cracked the code there.
You've been digging pretty deeply into the most recent data of how people are buying during COVID. Can you talk a little bit more about what you found?
Sure. Well, they're not buying during COVID.
Okay.
Sneakers anyway. Athletic shoes in March were down 40%. Athletic shoes in April were down 50%. It looks like that number may start to pop up a little bit as we reopen the country, but it doesn't feel like people are really rushing out to buy sneakers. But it's really interesting. NPD tracks 20 different industries. We don't just track sports. And anything work from home is on fire. Even sweatpants, by the way, the uniform of home work from home. The comfort stuff, bread makers, pizza ovens, etc., are on fire. Pajama business, slippers business are on fire. Toys, because the kids are home from school and trying to keep your kids entertained. And then in sport, home fitness is on fire because people go to the gym, so they're buying a treadmill or an elliptical. The bicycle business has been very good. And then one interesting thing that relates back to your primary interest, the basketball hoop system has been very strong. And many municipalities took the hoops out of the parks, took them down because they didn't want kids congregating in the parks. And so if your kid wanted to play ball, you got to buy him a hoop. And again, I think you say, okay, I've got one child or two. What sport can they play with only one or two people? Well, you can shoot hoops all day long by yourself. And so the portable basketball hoop business, in-ground hoop systems, and and balls, particularly junior balls, smaller balls for so smaller kids, all on fire.
Huh. Is there, like, how do people buy shoes? Because you need to try them on, right? Is it a little more brick and mortar than other?
Interestingly, about 30% of all athletic shoes last year were sold online, which is a very high penetration. In some countries, it's even higher than that. I think people generally know what size shoe they wear. The fitting of shoes today is not nearly as precise as it was 50 or 60 years ago when you bought not only the length, but you also bought a width. And today most shoes come in one width or maybe two. So I think people are pretty comfortable buying shoes online. And then with most retailers allowing free shipping both ways, it's pretty convenient to if you don't know your size, buy two and send the one back that you thought didn't fit you as well.
So
and then with COVID, that number is going to go way up.
Right.
Matt, so you've talked about the less than dramatic impact that players have on the overall sneaker sales. And so Curry's issue is only tells one small part of the Under Armour story, but Under Armour is under pressure right now in a way like never, maybe not for many years anyway. Is that what you?
Yeah, I before COVID came along, my position was that they were really focused on the wrong side of the marketplace, that performance is not in fashion right now. Fewer and fewer people are saying they're going to buy shoes for performance. And so if you want to be a performance-focused brand, you can do that and be successful. Brooks is one of those brands that's been successful, right? But it's a much smaller business.
Right.
If you want to be a big brand, you got to focus on where the market is. But we may see a shift now back to performance footwear as fashionable coming out of COVID. If more people are running, I think people are going to be more pragmatic in their purchases. Coming out of this, I think the dad shoe trend that was out there with big, ugly, clunky shoes. I'm not sure that's the first thing people are going to rush out to buy. And I think there's also going to be much more emphasis on health and wellness coming out of this. I think people are going to be concerned about. Well, if you look at the casualties of this epidemic, it's been people who were in ill health for the most part, right? They were overweight, smokers, diabetic, didn't have good health care. And I think you're going to see a renewed interest in people saying, I want to get healthy. I don't, when the next one of these things come along, I don't want to find out that, it's because I have high blood pressure that I got a problem.
That just strikes me as you're talking, all of these maybe shoes, or the vast majority, are made in China or Asia. And boy, it's been a little complicated, the relation with China, U.S. lately, huh?
Yeah, exactly. Most of the shoes that are made in China today are made for Chinese consumption.
Okay.
Most of the brands have moved their manufacturing to Indonesia and Vietnam. They're all of them are owned by Taiwanese brands. All the factories are owned by Taiwanese. So it's probably less of an issue, but there's another sort of tangential effect here, which is that China is the second largest sneaker market in the world after the United States. And most of the brands were showing robust growth in China, up 20% when US might be up 2%. And so they were counting on China to really drive their future sales results. And if the Chinese government says to people, don't buy foreign brands, Western brands, we could see some brands really get hurt.
How do they market to China? Do they use NBA athletes or professional athletes from America?
Yeah, it's interesting. Yeah, for instance, Kobe was really never that popular from a footwear point of view here in the U.S., wildly popular in China.
Oh, yeah. Henry knows all about that.
And LeBron, if you remember, went to China and got into a fight with somebody on the court. And LeBron has never really had the juice in China that he does here. So
because of the fight?
I forget. It was an exhibition game, and somebody bumped him, and things were said. So, and then you got the NBA problem that's still an issue.
Yes.
They're still not showing NBA games in China for the most part. So, it's still a volatile situation. And then when you add the political and the tariff thing on top of that, and it could get ugly for some brands.
If what you're saying, Matt, Henry, this is really interesting. If let's say the tweet never happened with Daryl, who's a friend of ours, and everything's fine, it would make some sense for the NBA to have their G League being played in China.
Yes.
Those players are really, really talented,
Yep.
and for different reasons haven't quite made it yet. But the talent is overwhelming. You see it on the court. I watch those games all the time. It would make some sense to expose. People think it's the American exposure that's making all this marketing play, when in reality, that's not the case.
Right.
The Chinese aren't watching American basketball.
No.
I mean, American college basketball. They're not watching
Right.
Duke. Like, what can Zion's impact be?
So far, not so much in terms of merchandise sales. And again, I wrote a blog about this, saying I didn't think he was going to have much of an impact because of the fall off in all the other marquee athletes, whether it's LeBron or Harden or Durant. None of those guys are earning out their money. So they didn't do a real signature shoe for him, and maybe that was in the works for playoffs. I don't know, but so far he's had minimal impact on merchandise sales.
There's this topic that came up yesterday is the NBA's been very aggressive with marketing and very successful, and there's a lot of that logo's on a lot of stuff, and it's on a lot of stuff in China. But it struck me as like, oh my goodness, the last couple inches of Michael Jordan at the floor are the most valuable couple inches, and they just didn't make that a licensed product. That one got away from them. Right.
And I think you're going to see. I look at the leagues is now strapped for cash. You're going to see big advertising logos on every pro team.
Yeah.
I'm absolutely convinced that the introduction of sleeves on jerseys in the NBA was about having more space for ads.
He said that. Adam Silver said that. Yeah. He said that like a guy like him, he said something slightly different. I think I agree with you, but he did say that he's like, I'm a 50-year-old dad looking guy and I'm not going to wear a tank top. Right. But I might wear a t-shirt.
Right. Absolutely.
Yeah,
absolutely.
If you were in a lab and we're creating a very, very marketable NBA athlete for sneakers, what would that include? Not just as in gameplay, but just in general, who could eventually start selling shoes again really well, both in China and globally?
I'm sorry, here or in China?
Yeah, both. I mean, what would it take to be the next Jordan in a sense?
I think, and again, some of this predates COVID because again, I'm anticipating potentially we see a shift away from sportswear or athleisure to more performance footwear.
Right.
But to me, the brands need to be leveraging their assets to wearing their products off the court. Someone wrote in Business of Fashion or one of the fashion publications that the runway today is from the bus to the locker room.
Mm-hmm.
So we're paying attention to what our favorite athletes are wearing, whether it's headphones or caps or clothes, shoes. What are they wearing on that runway? And if I'm a brand, and you take an asset like Harden, who has a real fashion sensibility, right? And put him in Adidas all day long. But that's not in his contract. His contract is he wears Adidas when he's playing ball, and that's it. And so you'd have to change the contracts up, obviously, and then more money would be exchanged when you do those things. But to me, I think that's really how you start to leverage some of these athletes is by making them more of a sportswear than just on the court.
Matt, I was told, and I told this to Henry when I first was told to me by one of Harden's friends, that his deal gave him a huge bonus if off-court merchandise that he had sponsored sold above a certain number, and that's why he was dating a Kardashian girl. He was trying to get exposure to that market.
Wow.
If you remember when he signed with Adidas, they delivered a whole panel truck of sportswear shoes to him, superstars and Stan Smiths and so forth. So that could very well be. But I don't feel like they're promoting him wearing those products. I think it's just it's hope you see him wearing those products thing as opposed to running an ad campaign around it. So,
Matt, you've been very sober about power of drops and endorsements. I hope that secretly somewhere behind you, you have like this incredible collection of Yeezys that you just keep for special occasions.
Yeah, what do you wear?
I don't have any sneakers.
Oh, no sneakers at all. There you go.
I'm agnostic.
That's good. That's good.
I'm wearing
Well, yeah, let's see.
all the Kai flip-flops.
There
Nice.
we go.
Okay.
Nice.
That's a jaded insider right there. Did you play sports at all or coach at all?
No.
No.
And do you have a sport that you?
No, actually, I did coach my son's t-ball team, and we were the only t-ball team in the history of the game to get 3 outs in 1 inning.
I made when I did t-ball, my twins, after every at bat for the other team, we made all 9 players shift from pitcher to first base to right field, and I did it for a smart reason. But the biggest reason was otherwise they'd be digging a hole in China. Because
Right.
you know me in t-ball, everyone gets at bat, and these kids are digging, and they're 5 years old. So I remember those days. But is there a sport that you like above any other, just as a fan?
Well, I'm a huge baseball fan. I probably follow Boston Red Sox obsessively, but I watch basketball. I like the pro game better than the college game. I watch a lot of NFL, but I've been trying to watch K-ball, Korean baseball, and it's not working for me.
Yeah, I haven't watched it either.
So we usually near the end of the show bring on Gerard, who's quarantined in Manhattan, and asks better questions than we do.
Manhattan via Paris, right?
There he is. There he is.
I see you in the
Matt.
meatpacking district there, Gerard.
Matt, this was a really interesting conversation. A couple questions for you. So you mentioned athletes are not performing the value of their contracts, and I've seen it with the sneaker numbers. Is it who from Nike basketball is selling shoes? I think take Jordan aside. Is it Kyrie? Is Kyrie still like the number 1 shoe seller?
Yeah, yes. I think Kyrie will come out this year as being the top seller again. The market's very disrupted, but Kyrie and LeBron both were relatively close together. LeBron going to LA made a difference. When players change cities, they can jump the business up really nicely. So, and LA is not a basketball shoe market by any means. Yeah. But going there helped him. But so yeah, Kyrie and LeBron are probably your 2 number one.
Wait, what cities do buy basketball shoes?
It's all I-95 corridor. It's Boston to Washington, basically.
Huh.
New York City is the epicenter of basketball.
Huh.
The Acela line.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So last question. We often, I'm sure because you have the data and the numbers, we often hear about the consumer purchasing power of the Black or African American person. Like what is that like as it relates to footwear vis-a-vis everyone else?
Well, I think yes, we can really dig into the demographics, and I don't have the numbers on the top of my head, but the young Black males are clearly the core consumer for most of athletic footwear, and not necessarily shoes like Tangent and Monarch, but for the more player-driven, endorsed kind of products for sure. And so it's an outsized impact. There's no question.
What else? We've used almost all of our time.
I'm amazed. I have a question for Matt.
Yeah.
Matt, is there any? So you're not watching sports the way like Henry and I and Gerard have to watch it, but are you keeping track of like the energy? Obviously, Zion coming out had a big name. Are you monitoring that? And if so, is there anyone in any sport that you think has some momentum behind it to really be a game changer? Even though it's not going to change the whole ocean, it might have a nice ripple in the pond.
Well, we don't actually track that. So I'm really looking mostly at merchandise sales as my indicators here. So I really don't think that we're going to see someone come up who's going to be, as I've said many times. Let me put it to you this way: there will never be another Michael Jordan in terms of merchandise sales. You can argue about whether he's the greatest or not. And after the PR campaign, the documentary came out, and I worked for the guy. So, but there will never be another Jordan in terms of merchandise sales. That was a phenomenon that really nobody knew what it was going to happen. It was not like it was planned, and there was so much serendipity that went into that. Whether it was, ESPN was first coming out. The league had been the drug and thug league for so many years and cleaned
24 hours news,
right.
cable news, and sports.
Yep.
Yep.
Yeah, I mean, before ESPN, you could only see your local team, and it was the previous night's highlights, right? Because they couldn't get the film done quickly enough. So that changed everything. And then, I think you got to go look at Dr. J and Magic and Larry and how they built the personality, the platform for the personality that the league has become today. I think all of those things really contributed.
Oh my goodness. What just occurred to me? The way they can do deep fakes now, they can retroactively put different shoes on Dr. J.
Yes, you absolutely could.
That would probably move some product, I would think.
Henry, Bilal had an interesting question. So, Matt, you mentioned that no athletes aren't really living up to their contracts. What about the collabs that are done by celebrities like Kanye, Travis Scott, Drake, and people like that? Are those worthwhile for the sneaker companies?
It depends on how much they're paying them. You go back to the original idea of collabs, and it was about, hey, I'll give you some shoes for your friends and family. You give it the bragging rights that you had a shoe with somebody, and that was all it was required. And it was really, I think, for the consumer, I think it was really viewed as authentic, and there really was an emotional attachment. You heard guys say, this is the first shoe my mom bought me, or this is the first shoe I played ball in, and that kind of honesty and authenticity, I think, really mattered. Today, so many of the collaborations are what are you going to pay me? I mean, Kanye left Nike because Nike wouldn't pay him, and Adidas paid him $10 million, and I think that we've lost some of that authenticity. The other thing I think is troubling about collabs is that I have Google Alerts set up on all the companies that I track, and I think there's a new collaboration announced about every 10 seconds.
Yeah.
And when there is, it's just noise now, right? So I don't see a bright future. And there was a interesting piece in Business of Fashion this morning about that the influencer market may be over. As they're speculating that fashion becomes more homogenized, that we're all going to work from home, sweatpants and sweatshirts, and we're not going to be dressing up or putting on fancy outfits. So,
well, there goes my career.
Yeah. So it could be. It's going to be really interesting how influencers and celebrity collaborations evolve.
Interesting. Thank you so much, man. I'm sorry I failed to properly invite you. Thank you for hanging in there and joining us regardless. And thank you, David. Thank you, Gerard. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks,
Yep.
guys.
Glad to do it. It was a lot of fun.
All right. Thank you.